Continental Drift, a program where we track the tectonic shifts redefining Ethiopia, Africa, and the whole world. Brought to you by Sputnik Africa. Hello and welcome to Continental Drift, the program where we go beyond the headlines to understand how global events reshape economics, power, and everyday life across Africa and the global south. Today's episode brings together two deeply connected realities. First, we look at food systems under pressure. Across Africa, and especially in Ethiopia, rising global tensions from the United States and Iran standoff to instability in the Red Sea are driving up fuel costs, slowing trade, and increasing food prices. What appears to be a distant conflict is now shaping what people can afford to eat. But this is not only about crisis, it is about structure, about how food systems in the global south remain dependent on external inputs, global markets, and fragile supply chains. At the same time, we turn to Africa's youth. At the 6th African Youth Leadership Diplomatic Conference, young voices from Zimbabwe are raising deeper questions about sovereignty, ownership of resources, and the long shadow of colonial systems that still shape economic and political realities today. To unpack these two major dynamics, we're joined by Dr. Ashagre Zewdu, Associate Professor, Scientific Advisor, and Consumer Advocate, helping us understand food systems, resilience, and sovereignty. And from Zimbabwe, Daniel Zinyama, Corporate Affairs Director at International Youth Connect, and Nyasha Ador Gazimbi, Youth Delegate and Pan-African Advocate, sharing perspectives on youth resources, Africa's position in a changing global order. I'm Aidan Tashoma, and this is Continental Drift. Food systems across the global south are facing a new kind of stress. Not because there is no production, but because systems are not fully in control. In Ethiopia, farmers produce oilseeds, yet the country imports edible oil. Fertilizers and inputs come from outside, and when global supply chains are disrupted, the impact is immediate. Fuel prices rise, transport cost increases, food becomes more expensive. At the same time, instability along key trade routes, especially the Red Sea, is slowing shipments and raising costs across the border. This exposes a deeper issue. Food security is not only about growing food, it is about processing, storage, energy, and control over the system itself. And this is where the idea of food sovereignty becomes critical. To break this down and to understand whether this moment is a crisis or an opportunity, we're joined by Dr. Ashagre Zewdu, Associate Professor, Scientific Advisor, and Consumer Advocate. So welcome to Sputnik Africa, Dr. Ashagre, and thank you for joining us today and for taking the time to speak with us. And we really do appreciate you saying yes to this conversation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So let's begin. When we talk about food security in Ethiopia here today, how much of the challenge is actually about production and how much is about structural dependence on the external systems?
Okay. Thank you. I think the ongoing war that we are having currently is a good opportunity for us to look at ourselves. So as you said, for me, production is critical. But the problem is only partly for me. Honestly, most of the things are structural. We invest a lot in the production, but we lose a lot. So this is both in terms of production. There is a lot for us to do because the population size of Ethiopia is increasing every day. Now we are almost 130 million people. It's a lot for one country. We are second population country. So the production have to meet the demand that we have. But at the same time, the one that we produced well with lots of inputs from other part of the world, we are losing a lot. So there are a lot to do in the structure. We'll come to each of them later. But in terms of the value chain, the supply chain, the post-harvest, even the market, the equity of distribution of materials, commodities are not equal. At the same time, you know that most of our agricultural inputs, I cannot say only agricultural inputs, even industrial inputs, we rely mostly from those who are imported from other parts of the world. So this is definitely tell us that we have both issues, but we can improve 50% of the problem with structural modification and work.
So building on that, like you said, the tension between the United States and Iran and the ongoing instability in the Red Sea, How are global conflicts translating into everyday food price pressures and also supply distributions here in Ethiopia?
Yes, we are feeling it. I'm feeling it as a person. Everyone is feeling it. The only thing that we need to see that the time quickly we felt it is a disappointing part, honestly. It was just one fuel disruption. The city, the country, we are facing a serious problem. That tells you that we rely on many things on the global politics or context. So actually, we didn't use the opportunity. For me, COVID has been an opportunity. Before this war has come, COVID has been a lesson because the same thing happened. We have been fearing with our life as well. But even that during those times, I don't think most of us have done the job that should have continued doing. I understand. Then when Trump comes the second term, that also should give us an opportunity to learn once again, because, developing countries, including Ethiopia, depend on aid a lot. When US aid was cut, how many people have suffered on that. So that gave us also another preparation period for me. Honestly, if we have been careful enough, if we observed how the world order is going, it could have been a good opportunity for us to use COVID, the Trump administration, the change that have come, could have given us opportunity. But now the serious, you can call it the living exam, has come finally. And now the war that's going on between the Iran and USA is going to affect us. And this is seen because our transportation system, logistics, import, and everything, we might see it later, the paradox later, but this, we felt it very quickly. So you can see it now. It has been a month since the war has started, but for us, it looks like now a year time, because it's affecting every day, not the luxurious life, but the basic food price and everything has become very serious. And at the same time, the alarming rate of the way everyone is thinking, business as usual, is not comfortable for me, honestly. The government, the citizens are not feeling it yet. But to make the problem less, we should be serious enough starting from today. And I think this interview has come at a great time, honestly, to be proactive and do something, not only the politicians, the policymakers, but every citizen should contribute to make this thing the way that we can withstand it.
So against that backdrop, Doctor, Ethiopia exports oilseeds while importing edible oils, and also relies heavily on imported fertilizers, like you mentioned. So how do you interpret this contradiction in the context of food sovereignty?
Okay. This is the question that has been always a paradox for me. Honestly, as a food scientist, it always has been a paradox for me. I always write blogs for policies for government, and I always say that Africans or Ethiopians are the ones who are not using our own commodities. It has several policy issues on that, but as is to the least commodity of edible oil, we wish to get it from our neighborhood through small SMEs, where they can extract sesame oil, near oil, peanut oil, and we could have covered our oil need. But now those edible oil commodities has become very expensive for us. Why? We cannot compete with the world. For example, recently the government has allowed soybean to be exported to China. So most of the factories in who to produce soybean oil were not able to get the raw material. I understand. So this happened for a long period of time. I know it is a transaction, but for me, this is also has a public health issue, because we are importing more than 90% of our edible oils is palm oil. And we know that from the science that this is mostly unhealthy. So you know that non-communicable disease has surpassed 50%. And yes, in Ethiopia, from that, cardiovascular disease is the top. And mostly this is coming from consuming of unhealthy oils. So for me, the transaction is a zero game for me. I've been saying this, government need to think about the export of such healthy commodities and importing unhealthy. By the way, the same currency goes from the oil that the one that you exported, you invested it back for the importation of palm. I understand. So for me, this is a zero game. We have been saying it for a long period of time. It's just not edible oil. You know, our staple is teff. Government previously has banned the export of teff grain, teff flour, only in the purpose of injera only. But now most people consume that injera. Most people depend on that. But the export of the flour has been allowed currently. You might find in Canada, USA, Ada from Ethiopia has been, you see it in the supermarket. Yes, the currency is a lot. But at the same time, in such cases, the paradox is critical and we need to think about it. At the same time, you heard that meat price has escalated a lot because most of them go to Gulf countries. So whenever I listen to the news that now the government was not able to export meat to Saudi Arabia because of the war and other thing, that means that we'll eat enough meat. As an opportunity, good for us. So that transaction, we need to think about it honestly. So this paradox, I'm not saying that we should not export completely. There are other economic things that we want to do with the dollar, with the currency, but we need to prioritize and we need to make cost-benefit analysis calculations. You said you are economist, so we need to make those calculations and we need to make decisions based on that, not just because one way you'll get currency, on the other way you lose something. We need to have those calculations. So for me, this paradox, one way or another, now the real issue has come, so we'll think about it.
So moving forward, Doctor, to what extent is the real bottleneck not agricultural output, but the lack of integrated value chain, particularly in storage, processing, and also distribution?
Okay. So going beyond the production, now by doing several things, by bringing fertilizer, by bringing pesticides, you have done a lot. And it's like raising a child. You have done a lot. Then imagine that your child started smoking or doing drug or something like that. So some of our problem, we invested on the production, but the other value chain are missing links. I understand. Okay, you invested a lot and you harvest it. One, we depend on the rain. We don't have irrigation system. We depend heavily on the rain. That have to completely change, honestly. Next to that is that, do we have enough storage silos, the one that you see in the middle of the city? Do we have enough storage silos to keep what we produce properly? Will come later that 30 up to 40% and beyond that will be lost from production up to consumption. And as you said previously, our agro-processing, yes, the raw materials are not going to be value are not going to be added. So that's going to be a problem, including cold storage. We don't have enough chillers, cold storage, so that we can make them stay for longer period of time. Processing. And at the same time, when it comes to a household level, if you see the waste that's coming from the municipal city, most of the waste is food waste. So you can see that when I say that, not only that waste, whenever I see people in the meat restaurants, eating a kilo is a waste for me. Your body doesn't need that much. Honestly, you are wasting. It could have been end up being distributed equally to somebody, but people are lining up eating a kilo. I'm sorry about that, but as a nutritionist, honestly, it's a waste of resource because your body, if I make it large for you, you need only 200 grams of meat per day. But now you are eating a kilo means 5 times. Imagine people sitting there the whole day, eating 3 times meat. It's a waste for me. So this requires also behavioral change. And I don't know how that behavior come. Me, myself also, I do that, but behavior also have to change seriously. And our food habit, nutrition habit, honestly, is not appropriate. So it is a continuation of many things that we need to do. By the way, for this, we have a policy, food system policy, strategies are there, papers, we have a lot of them, but how many of them has been implemented, monitored, and we have seen the actual change? That's what I'm asking. Honestly, I don't intend to attend the workshops anymore because I'm tired of doing the same thing. But now I need action and monitoring and seeing what changes we have come with all our documents. So some of things, it's not about research. It's not about policy, rather implementation and practice.
So where exactly are the weakest links today, in your opinion? Is it at the farm level or logistics or in the agro-processing capacity?
Okay. What you need to understand is that the biggest problem that we have is our agriculture system is very old. We are trying our best, but still for me, the use of technology in our agricultural production is very poor still. We need to invest a lot. I know the government said that they used to have only 1,000 tractors. but now they have reached around 20,000. But imagine for 130 million people, 20,000 tractors, conveyors is very little amount. So it tells you a lot. I understand. So we need to prioritize, I understand, investing more in agricultural technologies. We cannot use ox steel. We use them. I understand it's like 3,000 years, but it is disappointing, honestly, to still see that. So for me, working in the agriculture, I know the government is saying that they want to do multidisciplinary economic reform, information technology, AI, gold mining. Yes, that's appropriate. But for me, the yeast or the issue is going to come from agriculture. Because we are resource constrained economically, we are not a rich country. So you could imagine that 60% of the GDP is coming from agriculture, but we invest only a little amount is budgeted for agriculture. So it's a critical paradox. So I'm not saying only the government, but private sector should engage on this. At the same time, for scientists like me, I cannot get loan to do agriculture. Our youth want to get into agriculture. Yes, it's okay. So agriculture to become attractive, we should give more investment for our youth to start agriculture. At the same time for agro-processing, I understand. So if we are sure about our food, our life will be comfortable, I understand. So we need to go back to that thinking once again, and we need to invest a lot on the agriculture. By the way, this food security is affecting the whole country. A starving person is not going to be stable. Politically, in terms of chaos, war is going to continue. And for me, even me, a professor, in terms of the food security level of mine, previously and now is declining day by day. I understand? So this tells you nobody is going to be comfortable. So we need to invest in the production a lot, even if a lot is lost. First, we need to start from the agriculture. Then next one, in every part of the value chain, we need to do the work we're supposed to do across the value chain, honestly. In the distribution, in the processing, in the storage, and everything have to be done properly.
And also at the same time, post-harvest losses in some commodities remain alarmingly high. So what does this say about inefficiencies in the systems, and why has this issue persisted despite policy attentions?
Okay. So you are right. That are the disappointing things. So some people, I'm part of the Post-Harvest Management Society of Ethiopia. And we also developed the post-harvest strategy of Ethiopia the last 2 years ago. But as you say, that nobody believes us when we say grains will lose up to 30, up to 40%. This is, by the way, when you say this is only in terms of volume. I understand. Still, some amount of grain is saved, but it can also be affected by fungus, aflatoxin, and other things. We didn't count that. So when we talk about 30 or 40%, it's just that the grain can be used unsafely. I understand. So if we go to quality level, even the level would have been much higher than this. When it comes to fruit and vegetables, the number goes 50 up to 70%. I understand. Mango, avocado, tomato, such kind of perishable products, their loss will become 50 up to 70%. I understand. So it tells you, sometimes we focus on the production, but half of it is lost. So why not we invest also in the other part? Yes, but I can understand that investing in such kind of technologies is very expensive. How much does a metal silo cost to have a proper, it's only around Gotara where you find a proper silo that we know from history. Have you ever seen any of these silos around the regions whenever you go somewhere? You don't see them. I understand. So there are big companies like Buller and other companies always advertising us and telling us, the government advising, you should invest on this. Even if the initial capital is expensive now, the return period, 5 years, 10 years, you'll get the benefit. So it is about the transaction. I understand. Should I invest high money now, or should I invest later? I understand. So not only at Ethiopian level, even African Union level, we hosted last year the 4th African Post-Harvest Management Congress and Exhibition. I've been there. So we always have that discussion, but investing in technologies, investing on the only thing that I appreciate from the government is for anyone who brings such kind of technologies, post-harvest management technologies, they come for duty free. There is no tax, there is no tariff. So that such kind of encouragement are there, But the problem is that private sector, they have other illegal way of making money in Ethiopia. But now, due to the economic reform, I'm seeing a change now. Many investors are coming to me for consultation to start up a business, to do agro-processing and such kind of things, because the other money laundering or other kind of businesses are not happening anymore. So I really want to appreciate the work the government is doing on that regard, to make everything legal. Transaction and everything is appropriate. So when people has been prevented from that, they will go into a formal business orientation or making business scheme. So we'll see that in the coming years.
And taking this further, how would you distinguish between food security and food sovereignty in the Ethiopian context, and which should be the priority today?
Okay, thank you. I hear these words. But do you really think that one country can become food sovereign by himself? Meaning, food sovereign means it doesn't mean that you produce everything by yourself. At least you have the capacity to buy. For example, take Singapore. More than 70% of her commodity is not produced in country. They have the purchasing power to be food sovereign, to get materials from abroad and other places. So the definition of food sovereignty goes beyond food security. But what I'm recommending first, before we talk about food sovereignty, first let us ensure food security. Food security is about availability, accessibility, yes, and utilization of the food product. So do we have that in place first? For developing countries like Ethiopia, first we need to think about food security. Yes, I hear in media and other places, politicians, people talking about sovereignty. But that should come in a stage. It is too ambitious plan. Have you understand? You import fertilizers, you import pesticides, you import while you are dependent this much, it will be very difficult to become food sovereign. But at the same time, have you understand? In a war like this, will give you to think yourself how you are going to be affected. Now we are affected, yes. So we are affected because of our food sovereignty is in the hands of somebody else. It's locked. The key is not in our hand. So at least we need to do some commodities. For example, edible oil, we can become sovereign on that because we have the commodity. We can say that it's not allowed to export. I understand. So by choosing most critical items for the community, we can become food sovereign on that. Any luxurious items, we don't have to worry about that because those population who are going to use those commodities are going to be few. But for those commodities, where the whole mass or population are using, we need to be at least a food sovereign. And to do that, it's not directly you become a food sovereign country. You need to work on the agricultural input. You need to produce your own fertilizer. You need to do your own pesticides. You need to produce, I don't know if it is not gas, you need to think about electricity and other things. I understand. So it is a bigger concept than that. Are we going to achieve it? I heard that there is only one country who can feed themselves. Only one country in the world so far. Others, even the developed countries, are going to be dependent one way or another in the global market.
So looking at infrastructure with expanding power generation from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, how transformative can energy access be in enabling agro-processing and also cold chains and rural industrializations?
Okay. Thank you. That is a big investment for Ethiopia and at the same time for the whole Horn of Africa. Honestly, having heard the production level has increased, the electricity amount has increased significantly. Yes, I remember the time 10, 15 years when I'm consulting in Injera industries, because of shifts of electricity, we have shifted to using, it's a factory, but we shifted to using wood stick and the smoke and everything. That's the way we used to bake it. I understand. So whenever I see now the electricity or the lights or over the corridor, I'm very surprised. Even when I was in university, whenever I want to study, some days there will be no light. So this tells us at least production of electricity has increased. But what you see in the city or all over the city tells you something. Do you think that we can light the corridors if we have enough industries in the country? This tells you that we don't have enough industries. That's why we are making the streets very nice. I understand. We produced it. The electricity has been produced, but I don't think we are using it for the right purpose. As you said, rural agro industry industries could have used this much electricity if we have enough industries in the country. So for me, you know that most of them are shut down. Most industries, food industries, not only food industries, many industries are not functional anymore. So this electricity, I don't think we are using it for the right purpose. I wish it could be dark and I get a food. I understand. So I don't want the street to the whole light making the buildings beautiful. I understand. We could have used this for something else. That's why Bitcoin mining is happening in Ethiopia, because there is cheap electricity. Everyone is coming and mining it. So this still tells you that we don't have enough industries who's going to take up this energy. For me, in my assessment, that will be there. So for this intensifications of industries, people have to, government and private sectors have to be engaged more from other businesses. Now, the highest revenue is from service. I don't know. Next, there is tourism. So if you, how much of the GDP is covered from agro-processing is very little. From industries is very little. So to change this paradox and to become food sovereign, we need to have lots of industries. As you said, we need to get loan. Banks should give us money to start up these businesses, replace import substitution. We need to invest a lot. So for me, I don't think we have enough rural industries, especially agro-processing is very little. We are not able to change our tomato into ketchup so far. It's already small businesses who do that.
Yeah.
So that has to change completely.
It's largely untapped.
Untapped, yes, definitely. The electricity is there, but it's not used well. I know the production has solved lots of problems, but most of these industries are dependent upon input from other countries. If to bring enzyme, to bring yeast, or to bring anything, we are dependent on somebody else. So those industries also has been affected. I understand. And I need to tell you that, frankly, here, even previously, those who are industries who are producing or who are exporting are not making money from the real commodity. I understand. They are making the amount of dollar, only 50 birr or something like that. You take that up and you launder it and you'll bring either a car or a ceramic. You'll get the profit from that. I know many companies who export different products, but their actual business is not from selling the commodity itself. It is just a pretext to get the dollar and invest it on something like that. But now this is changing. I see that change, but this should continue completely.
And at the macroeconomic level, given ongoing foreign exchange constraints, how risky is Ethiopia's reliance on imported agricultural inputs in a period of global inflation and also currency volatility?
Okay. I can give you an example in our use of fertilizers. Most of our soil is becoming unfertile or acidic because we use too much inorganic fertilizer, meaning inorganic fertilizers like urea and others through time will make your soil to become acidic. And to treat that, you need to use calcium sulfate or lime. I understand. So previously, there have been traditional techniques like using natural compost materials. Whenever you go somewhere, the farmer doesn't want to use any of them. We don't give the land a break. I understand. For example, after you produce for some years, the nutrients will be lost from the soil. So you need to give him a rest for some time, but we don't do that anymore. We are putting more fertilizers on that, and it's becoming almost dead. I've understood many places we are facing that problem. At the same time, intercropping. Whenever you harvested somewhere today, if next year you need to use a legume like peanut or other things. I understand. So we have been going for rapid food security rather than sustainability. So we need to go back and look ourselves once again. Is this way that we have gone so far? Now, let us say this year harvesting time or planting time, if there is no fertilizer, how much will be our production volume? How much it will be? Do we wheat will get the same amount? Do we get the same amount? Because all the crops have become dependent on fertilizers. So me, with my group, we are researching that at least we need to blend it, organic and inorganic in some proportion, so that this can become what? Sustainable. So we need to use such kind of technologies. Otherwise, depending solely on this is going to become a problem. I'm not saying fertilizers are not important there, but there is something that I want to appreciate. The government Ethiopia around Somali region, with collaboration with Dangote, has for the first time, has started to take out natural gas. That is the input for fertilizer. So first you take out the natural gas, then the natural gas will be at least changed into urea. So that will give us at least some bargaining power in a time of crisis. For example, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, they have a nice fertilizer producing companies. So the effort that the government of Ethiopia has started is really appreciative. So we'll see when that's going to become feasible. So this have to be appreciated. I understand. Similar to the cement factory of Dangote. Now the price of cement has significantly reduced. So this will tell you that investing some of the things that you can do locally, doing them locally will go a long way.
And Doctor, alongside geopolitical shocks, the climate change continues to affect agricultural output. So how do these overlapping pressures compound risks within Ethiopia's food systems?
Okay, I can understand. This is another problem that's in our way. Climate change is affecting us. Yes, that's why we have COP32 is going to come to Ethiopia, because climate has become a serious issue. So that's why I understand in any economic reform or developing economic reforms, you need to make climate as cross-cutting. Previously, you can't say gender, nutrition. It's like that. Now everyone understands that having harmony with the nature is very critical. So that change of mentality is very crucial. And you can see the generification, that work that's happening in Addis Ababa. You can see that rivers, are getting a chance to be healed. So this will tell you we need to do something about the climate. At the same time, but we need to understand that we need to invest more in climate resilient indigenous crops. For example, if we take teff, the amount of water teff take and wheat is not the same. Wheat takes twice than teff. So nature has its own solution already. We need to invest, but where do we invest our money? Is it in teff or in wheat? Do we invest on sorghum or maize? Maize, wheat are taking too much water, and it affects the climate because you take too much pesticide, too much water. So we need to be resilient crops have to be used. That's why I've been advising the government with the same level of commitment for wheat, there should be a commitment for teff. I understand, but there is our research work and other things are not invested in making the production of teff higher. Rather, we focus on the commercial grains. They cannot become very sustainable. I'm not saying it's only for plants, for animals. Most of our cows and animals are drought resistant. But the government has an initiative to replace our cows with hybrid cows. But do you think that they are going to be the same resilient to the climate? I understand. That's why some farmers, they don't want to adopt the hybrid cows because they require a lot. The climate condition is the same. So we need to think, I'm not saying that we should not have hybrids, but we need to be careful that the change in the climate is not going to affect us. At the same time, we need to think about our resource of biodiversity. Now you heard about GMO. Other worlds are telling us to change our product to a GMO. This dependence, I understand, because whenever you buy GMO from other countries, even if it improves the pesticide resistance and other things, they might make you dependent for seed. You might want to purchase from them only. So we need to have also our own grain banks, so that whenever such shock comes, we need to go somewhere and say we have our own grains to use on the time of difficulty. Otherwise, relying on commercial product that's coming from abroad, it's going to be a problem. I understand. So this is the same thing. For example, for flour companies, you get flour from Netherlands, but it's going to only grow 4 or 5 times. After that, there is a DNA that's going to kill it itself, so that you can buy them again. I understand. So such kind of tricks are there. We are in a global world. We'll be dependent, but we need to be very careful about our decision whenever we are making such kind of decisions.
So let's shift to the regional dimension. The African Continental Free Trade Area is often presented as a solution. So realistically, can regional trade reduce vulnerability, or does it risk producing the same dependency patterns at the continental level?
Okay. To judge it, it is too early because it just started last year. So does it bring what we thought about? No, we need to evaluate it. I think it's too early. Even from the beginning, me and everyone has been cautiously happy about it. I understand. With caution, yes, the opportunity is there. Trading among ourselves because it's close proximity might bring opportunity. But we are going to assess this after some period of time, 5 years or 10 years. Let us see if it actually brought Africa-Free Continental Trade, has brought the thinking or the idea that we thought. But as you said, there is a similar pattern that's happening now. Even last time when the government Ethiopia, through Ethiopian Airlines, when they export to African countries, there have been a celebration, but most of the commodities are raw commodities. They are not processed. So this tells you that, I understand, rather than exporting jobs, value and added products, we need to still process and send them to our neighboring countries. Even if there is no market in African countries, still we can consume them. I understand. So having that technology ready is very critical. So African free continental trade is very nice, but at the same time, we need to be very careful that we are not going to be dependent on one another. But this trade has been there. The only thing that's changed now is tariff and other things has been changed, and it's going to decrease among years. I understand. And you know that Ethiopia didn't register the most important commodities in that Africa free continental trade. She want coffee and other things. She said, no, these are not tariff free. So those such negotiations, power should be there, and we need to understand the dynamics in negotiation. I understand. So we need to have knowledgeable people whenever we negotiate. Yes, those who are experts, who are going to increase the advantage of our country, should be there. Not only FTA, now Ethiopia is going to be a member of the World Trade Organization. That will be another confounding factor that's going to come to ourselves. We'll see. Now she's near to become a W membership. We'll see if it's going to be opportunity or not. I have my doubts because the quality, the safety level of our commodities are not yet up to that level. They are substandard products, and you know that whenever you have such trade, everything is based on quality and standard. So if we didn't do our job, lots of products are going to be imported here, but little amount is going to be exported. That means your wealth is going to go to somewhere else. Me, if I got the opportunity to get a milk from Kenya, I'm waiting for that because I was not able to get milk for my kids or for myself at the moment because of the limited amount of productivity. It is scarce, supply is not there. So having that free trade is very critical. Yes. So commodities who are surplus in other African countries, going to another country is a good opportunity for us, honestly.
Let's bring it closer to the ground, and at the micro level, how significant are behavioral shifts like local sourcing and also reduced waste compared to the macro level policy reforms in building resilient food systems? And also, can consumer behavior meaningfully influence systematic transformation, or is policy still the dominant driver of this?
You know that in addition to my associate professor at the university, also I work as a board chair of the Ethiopian Consumer Protection Association. I've been working for many years to teach the consumer so that they can push the policy makers. I understand. So what I want to achieve here is that from my experience, what I have seen is that an individual person behavior can always be beaten by a system. Whatever you want to achieve, it is only micro level change that you can make as compared to the systemic level. I'm not saying that it is insignificant, but at the same time, behavior should give incentive for the system should give incentive for the behavior change. For example, one company has changed its behavior and he wants to produce a safe product. But next to him, there is somebody else who doesn't produce substandard product. But you'll go out in the market and both of them will get opportunity. Even if you have done the right job, the system didn't protect you. I understand. So for me, most of the things that you have seen in the city, it didn't come from behavior of the people. It come from the system. Now, the system has required you doing this thing is wrong. I understand. So for me, like in a developing country where the knowledge level, yes, the attitude level, the practice level is purified. This is part of development. Washing hand is still at infant level. When there is COVID, you wash. Other times, you don't care about it. So having that culture or behavior at individual level is important, but this requires lots of years to reach that level. So for me, for a developing country like Ethiopia, expecting a significant change by shifting the behavior is going to be not going to produce significant change for me. So we need to work on the system. I understand. So whenever I say the system, it is the institutions and everything that we do should reflect that so that people can copy. And even people who want to change their behavior, the system have to support them. I understand. So I'm not saying, as I said previously, people consume too much food without knowing. I understand. So giving that education, we are doing that, but the level of impact is not balanced for me. That's why we teach a lot for consumers to demand safer food, and then they will end up there. Even if I change my behavior, myself, if I go to the environment, I'm a nutritionist, but if I want to get vegetables, the food environment may not have that. So my diet is going to be affected by the environment and the system. Have you understand? So changing the system will give an opportunity for the individual behavior to bring a significant change. But I'm not saying that we should not work on that. But I'm thinking about structural and systemic change is what we need at the moment in our country and in most of African countries.
And finally, given all these pressures, if Ethiopia were to prioritize just 3 strategic interventions today to strengthen food security and resilience, what would they be, and how quickly could their impacts be felt?
The opposite of everything that I said will be the priorities. I understand. For example, we need to lower our dependence on imports. Yes, we need to invest more in agro-processing. These are some of the things that I'm going to recommend. But for me, working for many years and working with the government, working in the university, what I have seen is that the missing link for me is institutions. For me, to bring a significant change in a country, institutions have to be empowered. Have you understand? They need to be strong, accountable. So everything that we want to achieve, that we discussed previously, are going to come not through individuals. They are going to come through institutions. So for many years in Africa and in Ethiopia, I'm very disappointed with institutions. Institutions are working with silo. There is no coordination. Everyone is doing their own job, mostly focusing on personal benefits, corruption. Have you understand? People doesn't want institutional coordination because corruption happen easier when you are not coordinated. If you are coordinated, accountability will come. So for me, like the book of Why Nations Fail, there is one book which says why nation fails and why many nations has developed. It's about institutions, inclusive, non-extractive institutions. Everywhere you go, institutions are not inclusive for me. Whenever you speak something, you will be excluded out because your opinion changed from somebody else. So if we want to grow, we need to have that real democracy and inclusive in our institutions. Have understand. At the same time, many institutions do duplications of effort. The same institution do something, another institution does the same thing. He will ask you the same tax, the same revenue, and it's frustrating for an individual, for a businessman, and for everything. So that coordination, collaboration, and coordination, government should be very efficient. And even if Elon Musk is not there anymore, what I appreciate about him is that he used to have one institution where he opened up saying, the capacity of government institutions should be efficient. That's why many institutions has been closed through him. Have understanding so that you can decrease the amount of budget the government is losing every day. Now AI is there. You don't need many people. Have understand? So using technologies and other things, I think the real change is going to come for me is from institutions. Even if I advise the other things, everything that we discussed previously, import substitution, let us focus on fertilizers, let us prioritize. Everything that we have said, it's not the individual who's going to make them happen. Even if I know everything, I need to go through an institution to make it a policy, a legislation, practice.
So Dr. Ashagre Zewdu, thank you very much for your time and also for sharing your clear and valuable insights with us on this critical and timely issue.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Sputnik, it's my first time. Thank you for having me.
What we hear in this discussion goes beyond agriculture. It points to a bigger structural question. Who controls production? who controls processing, and who captures value. Because for many countries in Africa, the challenge is not lack of resources, it is how those resources are positioned within the global system. Controls production, who controls processing, and who captures value. Because for many countries in Africa, the challenge is not lack of resources, it is how those resources are positioned within the global system. And this is where the conversation connects directly to our second topic. If food systems reflect economic structure, then youth represents the future of that structure. Across the continent, young people are not only asking for jobs, they're asking for ownership, for participation, and for a new direction. And increasingly, they are questioning whether current systems, shaped by colonial history and global power dynamics, can truly deliver that future. Africa is often described as the youngest continent in the world. But youth today are not just a demographic fact. They are becoming a political and economic force. At the 6th African Youth Leadership Diplomatic Conference that took place between 25th and 29th of March, voices from Zimbabwe are calling for a shift. From dependence to ownership, from raw exports to industrialization, from external direction to internal control, at the center of this argument is a strong claim that Africa's challenge today cannot be separated from its past, from colonial systems that shaped borders, economies, and even education, and that new forms of external influence, often described as neocolonialism, continue to shape how resources are used and who benefits from them. But there's also a clear message of agency, that youth must move from participation to leadership, not only working within systems, but reshaping them. To explore these ideas, we're joined by Daniel Zinyama, Corporate Affairs Director at International Youth Connect, and Nyasha Ador Gazimbi, Youth Delegate and Pan-African Advocate. Thank you both for joining us today. Daniel, let me start with you. So, what are the critical challenges that African youth face nowadays, particularly within the broader global economic and geopolitical landscape, and how can these challenges be addressed effectively?
So when it comes to the critical issues that youths are facing in Africa, it's number one, knowledge and access to knowledge. Because even in the Bible, it says that my people perish because of lack of knowledge. So we have a group and a large majority of youth that are not educated on the effects or the amount of people that are invested in their neocolonialism and are trading away their freedoms for certain trinkets that they are being given by the West, by the North, and encouraged to go and live a life outside of Africa. So because of that lack of knowledge and because of that access to that knowledge, especially not understanding the value of the countries or the value of the continent that we are as Africa. Because look at it this way, every single colonial country that came into Africa refused to go back. Has individuals that have refused to turn back away from Africa and go back to their host countries. We have examples such as Zimbabweans with the Rhodesians. We have some examples with the South Africans, with the Boers and the Indians. These are all people that have moved out of their own countries to come here because they understand the value that is here within Africa. So that value has to be unlocked and has to be unlocked through knowledge. And the right knowledge is the knowledge of industrialization. And I'm hoping that every single African youth that is engaged in deliberations, that is engaged in economic activities, focuses on the keys or the roadmap to industrialization for the African continent. We need to start to industrialize. We need to stop building our African countries on export economies, but industrialized economies. And we need to go through our industrialization quick before we're taken over by the 4th and the 5th and maybe the 6th industrial revolution. So that is my opinion on what it is that African youths need and the critical challenges. We need to be knowledgeable. We need to increase the access to knowledge, and we need to give them the right knowledge, which is industrialization. Let them participate in the economy. Let them start businesses. Let them start farming and agriculture. Put them into mining. Put them into all these various sectors that are known for Africa, for being African. The reason why our colonial masters or the neo-colonialists are coming is because of these resources that we have. So let's put youth minds that know the value of these things so that they continuously benefit our people as the African continent.
And Daniel, coming back to you, so how does Africa's colonial past continue to shape its development trajectory, institutional frameworks, and also societal priorities? And what role should youth play in resisting emerging forms of neocolonialism?
The colonial past really did shake us as an African continent, but it wasn't the end of our story. The colonial past, yes, it did disturb our leadership structures. Yes, it did disturb our own economic structures. It also disturbed even our educational structures and what we prioritize in education. We have African countries that prioritize learning westernized languages. And how do we make them professional languages? So one of the key factors, which is one of the things that I believe, is linguistics. We have to ensure that we encourage African languages throughout the continent in all professional spaces, because those are the things that divide us, right? And that colonial past encouraged us to take pride in the things that divided us, the borders that we put up, the economies that were built in order to challenge other economies. We were not built, the colonial system was not built to integrate Africa, it was built to divide it. And now, because of the languages, because of the economic setups, because of the political setups that were left by the West, we have been contemporarily, we have been consistently destroyed economically, politically, and socially. So what we as youths need to do is to follow the advice of those that were the revolutionary leaders that took our independence, those liberation movements that were motivated to grab our freedom. Those are the ones that we should be following as African leaders. We should be tied to those people that believe that Africa was supposed to be for Africans. So as youths, like I said in the beginning, knowledge is important. We need access to that knowledge. We need access to that information. And we need access to those people that believe in our liberation. And more youths need to be interacting with your grandmothers, with your grandfathers, with your uncles that all fought the war. You need to be interacting with your leaders so that you know the direction in which Africa is supposed to take. An African mentality and not a Western or Northern mentality.
And Nyasha, how does the legacy of colonialism continue to influence African identity, cultural confidence, and development aspirations today?
Okay, the colonization, the colonialism, it still affects people of nowadays, because if you go to other countries, you can see that people, they have abandoned their way of talking, their way of living, like their culture. They have now adopted a thing called xenocentrism, which is a way of adopting or commenting other people's cultures and referring to yours as inferior. So, therefore, African countries, if you can check, most of them, they now dress like how European people dress. They now speak abandoning their languages. But I'm actually glad that due to all that, even though that still happened, as Africans, we are still bold enough to resist that colonialism. If you can check, like for example, here in Ethiopia, I can see that some of them, they are struggling to speak to speak in English. Why? Because they believe that their language is powerful. So I can see, and even if you go back to Zimbabwe, you can find out that some kids find it difficult to speak in English because they know that Shona is their culture.
Shifting toward agency and ownership within the economic sphere, so Daniel, how can African youth transition from being participants in an extremely driven economies to become true owners of their resources, their economies, and also ultimately their future?
Now, how do African youths become owners of their continent? Holistically speaking, First of all, it comes from industrialization, right? We need more youths to be entrepreneurs and not workers. We need more youths to be participating in business. Ownership is by buying something. You work for it. So all youths need to stand up and decide that we want to work for what it is that we want. If you want a free Africa, work for it. Purchase it with your blood, sweat, and tears, as our liberation fathers did. They knew that if we wanted to be free, we needed to fight for it. And if you want to own something, you need to buy it. And so if it is about us participating in every single economic sector, every single industrial sector, all youths need to be present. There has to be a government policy that forces all youths to be participant in every single industry that brings in money, that contributes to the national GDP, and any industry that contributes to the growth of the nation and the continent has to at least have 30 to 40% youth representation. That's how the youth begin to own their country. That's how the youth begin to own their region, and that's how the youth begin to own their continent.
Thank you. And Nyasha, in the face of emerging forms of neocolonialism and also external dependency, how can African youth practically respond to these pressures and build resilience within their own economies?
Yeah, what I can think they can do, like for example, Zimbabwe, it is now facing a crisis in terms of fuel and oil. Why? Because they expect fuel to be deported from Iran to come to their country for people to use. I think as Africans, if we can rely on each other for certain things, it would be of great help, and it can show our unity among ourselves. Like now in Zimbabwe, there is now inflation in fuel. Why? Because in Iran, there is war taking place and they can't trade with us their fuel. So therefore, they think that if they can make the prices higher, they would make it until Iran finishes their war. But if they could manage to get this fuel from any African country, it would be for the better. Because what I know is that as Africans, we have unity. Why? Because most of the time, Africa is not involved in wars. So if we manage to rely on each other for things, there is no way we would suffer with inflation.
And finally, Daniel, Africa is often framed as the youngest continent, yet remains structurally marginalized within global governance and financial systems. So what fundamental shifts are required to correct this imbalance and reposition Africa as a strategic actor rather than a peripheral one?
First of all, the mentality has to change. Africa is not the oldest continent. Where did life begin? Life began here in Africa. It began here in Africa. So Africa is not the oldest continent. Africa is not the youngest continent. Africa is the oldest continent. So any strategy that did not start with the origin was never meant to be a strategy at all. Because if Africa, with 60% arable land, could feed the entire world, what kind of strategy was built without Africa? If Africa is the origin of every single civilization, what kind of population strategy was built without consulting us? If the largest amount of wealth that is within the world is consolidated here in Africa, what kind of strategy was built without our consultation and treating us like a burden? That strategy was already wrong. If those strategies exist, need to be removed. And the youth of Africa need to start by planning our own strategy, our own vision, our own projections for our own continent. Without consulting them, because they did it without the origin. They did it without the first one. They did it without the individual that began everything. So we can invalidate that as a rebellious stance as youths. To say that if we're going to be creating our own economic structures, we'll create them at a national level, promote them at a regional level, and ensure that they're implemented at a continental level without talking about the globalization makeup. And if the globe wants to interact with Africa, it can interact with us after we have created our own frameworks that ensure that the rights of Africans, the economic future of Africans, and the political future of Africans.
Thank you both for your time and also for sharing such direct and thought-provoking perspectives. Thank you. What today's episode reveals is a shared pattern across different sectors. Global conflicts, even when they happen far away, continue to shape local realities across Africa. Food prices rise, economies feel pressure, systems are tested, but at the same time, these pressures are forcing new thinking about self-resilience, about regional cooperation, and about building systems that are less exposed to external shocks. For Africa and for the Global South more broadly, the question is no longer whether change is needed, it's how fast that change can happen and who will lead it. I'm Aidan Tashoma, and this has been